To start our showcase, I want to introduce Dr. Mario Montaño. Dr. Mario Montaño is a cultural anthropologist and folklorist. His research focuses on the foodways of the Texas-Mexico border. That is the focus of his work and of his upcoming publication, his upcoming book, and also the northern region of Mexico. His interests are on the anthropology of food. How do food-centered activities influence the construction of culture and gender identity? How do food preparation, distribution, and consumption contribute to men and women's social position and power? How does food symbolically connote maleness and femaleness? In addition, Dr. Montaño developed a university-level course on the Rio Grande River, focusing on the different regional cultures living along the Rio Grande River. Please welcome Dr. Mario Montaño.
Thank you very much, Alan, for the introduction. And also, want to thank the chefs for being here. They made this possible, and to all of you in the audience. And I'm going to do, my talk will be very brief. I'm going to deal with 4 expeditions. And these 4 expeditions are the Spanish expeditions. And I just want to highlight one thing, is that before they arrive, you also have to understand that groups, native groups, pre-culture groups, or pre-colonization groups, were already trading for 1,000 years, from inside of Mesoamerica to the present. And here with the Spanish expeditions is that you have to understand that they started about early 1500. And these are planned expeditions where you had 30 carts or 40 carts of food and people coming in to settle Texas, okay? And primarily the border in the Rio Grande. And so and I just want to highlight here the important Native American contributions to Texas-Mexican foodways. But here is someone to you. The expedition started as early as 1519. And just keep in mind this date, that it's 1519, this is when Hernán Cortés is in Mexico City. And these 3 expeditions, the expeditions in 1519 of Alonso de Pineda arrives at the mouth of the Rio Grande, what is Boca Chica, followed by 2 other expeditions, Diego de Camargo in 1520 and Governor Francisco Garray from 1523. These expeditions are coming from Jamaica. So just to have an idea, okay? That also gives you the idea how interested they are in this area, that they come from Jamaica. And also is that when you read the journals of these 3 expeditions, they don't mention anything about food. But they do mention descriptions of the natives, and they exoticize them. They refer to them as creatures and as savages, and many other historians have said that they doubted if they ever got out of the boats, you know. That's the other thing, because, you know, the descriptions are very just short and brief, you know. And the other important historical importance here is 1535, Salvador Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, and he described Native Americans living along the Gulf Coast, providing the first written accounts of foodways of people living in South Texas and the Gulf Coast. And of course, here in his case, what you do is that he lists a lot of people, a lot of foods, like pecans, mesquite seeds, and all this, and there's a lot of commas. And many of these explorers were trained in Spain how to record for the government. So you don't get too many descriptions. But you know how it is. If you're in charge, the more things you list, the probability is that you will get funded to do it again, right? I mean, it happens also in the Southwest in New Mexico, and the Hopi, the Navajo, and they go on, the Spaniards, and an endless list of things. But you wonder, there's no deep descriptions. Okay, with him is that part. Then the big ones that come here is 1689 and 1690, and here's Alonso de Leon. De Leon is his name, but his father was an Indian fighter. And his father sent him to Spain at the age of 10 years old to military school in Spain. So he comes back, and he leads 2 expeditions. And these expeditions that he crossed by This is still there, located, it's 35 miles south of Eagle Pass. And do I have a map behind me? Oh, no, no map? Just myself, okay. Oh, click forward? Okay.
It doesn't work?
No, it doesn't work, but it's okay because I'll describe it. I'll describe it to you. It's
Was there earlier? Back there, can we have the map? Okay, that's not it. There you go. I stopped.
okay.
Is that it?
This is yes, that's it. So give you here is that they come. Can I have that one? Is they cross through here, through Eagle Pass, and this is and this pass it was called Paso de Francia. Still, it's called, and it's located in this ranch called the Rio Bravo Ranch, and some of you might know this ranch is owned by the Bass brothers. You know, in Texas, you'll follow NFL, is the owner of the Kansas City Chiefs. But he owns this place, and so I got permission. I called this very nice lady, I think is one of the wives of Ramona Bass, and she gave me permission to go in, and gave several times I would go. So I mentioned this site because this is the place where Alonso de Leon and 11 other expeditions crossed through here, to this particular place. And when they crossed this place, they were greeted, according to the reports, by over 500 Native Americans. Understand, it's 500. And you know that they say that Europeans always round to the nearest tenth. And if you talk to other people in Latin America, journalists say, no, we don't do that. We try to go with an odd number because it creates more credibility, more reality, because the Americans always, or Europeans always round to the tenth. So here it says that there were 500 Indians to greet them. And I mentioned that because the town, before you get to the ranch, it's a village, it's called El Indio, Texas, and it's still there. The name and everything. So they were there now. From there, they got the guides to help them go from here, from San Juan Bautista all the way up here. And I think they would stop also a lot on the LaGrange, Texas. If you know, it's near LaGrange. Also, when I was a young teenager and a young adult, that LaGrange also was very famous for other things, okay? But we can go into that later, okay? But here, so I just want to give you this. They did get there, and this, when he was traveling with his group of people, there were about 68 carts, and they were supplied with food. Different food that they brought, okay? Mind you, they have already been in Mexico for 200 years. So they had access to wine, they had access to pork, ham, fruits, bananas, oranges that they had brought with them, coffee, many instances. So imagine this is when you bring all those types of foods, you introduce them to a group of people that are curious about those foods too, okay? So that's what they did. This is the first one that goes in there, okay? And also I kind of wonder is, so if you're from another culture, say the pre-contact culture, and you get this, I would like to know how did they made it their own? That's why I was interested in the change, the techniques and cooking techniques that people use even today to create something new, okay? Also is that in anthropology, you have culture change is created by direct contact. You know, this group met for the first time, and the other one said, oh, I like to try this. There's nothing oppressive with it. It's balanced reciprocity, and they change. But then there's another form of culture change that is called stimulus change. The stimulus is that when you get a tortilla, what do they do with it? And my students, they were Navajo, they have the Navajo taco or the fried bread. So they get things they got, but they made it their own. So I want to know that this is what's going on, the change. Okay, the other one is that I like to discuss is later from 1747 through 1750, José de Escandón settled the towns of Camargo, Reynosa, Guerrero, Mier, Dolores, and Laredo. Can I have the next slide, the next map? Or I can do it here. Okay, here. Now, understand they're coming to settle the border now. And José Escandón was an owner of a mine and related to the upper class, but he liked to also settle things and get prestige. And he funded his own expeditions. That lets you know how rich. But along with his expeditions, he brought a lot of Mexicans, he brought Creoles, and he brought also Native Americans with him and all. Here, class, I'm sorry I said class, this is not a class, okay? But you have 7 entrances. He had 7 teams of coming in from over here from Eagle Pass to Rio San Juan. So there were 7 groups, all of them coming in from different arts to settle the border, who we know today, the South Texas border. And as a result, Native Americans were exposed to cows, pigs, goats, and sheep, okay? And all this that they brought with them. And they were very serious because there were 7 teams of coming in from different areas to settle. Now, what I want to stress today, because it's going to reflect our lunch, is that Escandón arrives there, like I said, in 1750. In 1757, 7 years later, the Spanish government commissions a survey of those villages, those towns that were settled there. And they registered that in 1757 there were 2,600 head of cattle, 72,000 head of sheep and goats, along with 17 ranches owned by the different people, okay? Then by 1835, between the Rio Grande and the Nueces River, they recorded 350 ranches and 3 million head of cattle. So you can understand how that would affect the diet. And here I think is the Nueces River. So it's this part area here, all of this part area here, only here. Get everything south here, that was what they were recording on. They didn't go beyond the Nueces River. So you can imagine the impact that it has on these people. Now, the other thing here that I want to say is that these expeditions, raised the question is, what were the cultural and political consequences of these food exchanges? Like I've mentioned to some people is that, in my case, I'm very interested in the communication of food, the symbolic and cultural communication of food. These foods, how did they influence the political and the cultural impact of people living in this area, but also how this has affected us today too. And also, I'm not going to talk too much about food and conflict, even within families, But food is not neutral. It is very political and very cultural. And the other important thing that I want to say here, and I'm getting to the end, is that these foods, when they arrive, these people to the border, you have to understand that the foods that they're bringing have many cultural influences. They have from Mesoamerican influences, they have Spanish, French, African, Moors, Muslim, Islam, and Asians. So all of this is here. Now, how people use that, or how we use it today, is in many different ways, but I just want to give you an idea of all the impact that this settlement had, and also northern region of Mexico, and also in Texas, and also with the indigenous people, okay? So now some of these flavors and dishes that we're going to taste is they demonstrate the cultural confluences of 2 different foodways. Those of Texas indigenous people and those of Mexican people who were both indigenous and Spanish, okay? But these expeditions have made a great impact even today in our lives with the food. And so Silvia Cáceres will make carne guisada, also corn tortillas and flour tortillas. And I have to also let you, don't ask me the question is who invented the flour tortilla. because again, food is full of conflict. And I don't want to, well, you can try, you know. And then you have corn tortillas too, that she's going to be doing. And then you have Luis, his dear friends call him Huicho Olvera. He does cabrito en salsa con piquín. And as you know, that today el cabrito has been still very popular. You even have restaurants in the valley, San Juan, Far San Juan, that I go to restaurants where all they do specialize in cabrito and all the different foods from the cabrito. Okay, and also I have to tell you this. This is a shock to me. I went to McAllen and there was a restaurant, very nice restaurant that only sells cabrito, but it had a piano bar, a pianist playing, and also wine, a whole list of red wines and what did you say? It was very upper class, and it looked like they were professional Mexicans, like I am, you know. Except I don't dress professionally, but it was nice to me to see that too. That now it's a delicacy. Okay, and that's very important to understand that you have those foods, and also the other person is Joseph Gomez. He does mollejas asadas with corn tortillas. And all these parts come from all these animals that they brought in, okay? And so my point, just to reiterate, is that I like to look at food as what it communicates, okay? And it says a lot. When I eat food, some people ask me, what does it taste? Well, I can tell what it tastes, but that's not my interest. When I get a food, I like to think about it that I'm communicating with the food in the plate. And also that I like to read restaurant reviewers, because when I read them, then I make those connections, you know, and also their cultural and political connections. Because they also, when you read also food reviewers or restaurant reviewers, is the food also that they're describing is communicating social and cultural issues so that you understand, okay? And that is why I look at food from a cultural and political side. And also, you know, food is full of conflict, even within families that I've had. I once made a big mistake. I was with a family, we're brothers and sisters, and I asked them if they could please describe to me why frijoles refritos. What is the prefix? And this gets very linguistic. The prefix of pre, P-R-E, what it means. And one of them said, pre means that you cook them twice. You boil them, and then you serve. And another one, the brother said, no. It's mother by frijoles refritos, refried means that they cook them very well, rete bien. And believe me, a big argument, and then it elevated to a fight. Really, I mean, I said, never should I ask linguistic questions anymore. But my point is that there's a lot of evidence that food is also full of conflict. It's also full of pleasure. And also that food changes through time, in a sense. And hopefully that today with the 3 presenters, they're presenting today, Silvia, Luis, and Joseph, we will find something out, how they change their foods too, okay? Thank you very much for your attention.
Stay here. When I was looking at the map, I was thinking it's so specific to the food, and it's something that has been written about, but never clearly like this. Because I've read books about Tex-Mex food that says that the cows arrived in 1800. They say, which is not the case. So I'm just going to take a little bit of time before we go to the food, because it's so relevant. If you have any questions specifically, we can clear now with the scholar before we go to the chefs. I would like to give that opportunity. Take your time.
Thank you very much. I want to sit down.
So
yes.
Is there any documentation on how the Spaniards cooked their foods when they came over into this region?
When they came to this region...
Is there any documentation about how the Spaniards cooked their foods when they came into the region?
What they cook is they arrived there with a very sophisticated culinary tradition. You know, they had already been in Mexico for about 200 years. And also that they created Spanish dishes, Creole food. They used wine. They used cheese. Now they also had citrus fruits, oranges, and they had limes in the convents. So it was a very developed, sophisticated kind of cooking when they arrived there. Also the different cooking techniques. You know, they would cook with water, but you can boil, you can poach, you know, things like that. I mean, so they were very well developed. Also, the leaders of these expeditions were people that had a lot of wealth. They also owned a lot of land in Mexico, and also many of them originally came from Querétaro and Zacatecas. And these leaders of this settlement were not peasants. I mean, they came, they loaded the best foods in their carts that they liked. And it was, at that point you can say that it was, their food represented a particular social class. But the cooking techniques, yes. And the food that they ate was very refined. Now, I don't know about the Native Americans that they brought with them, how they cooked or that, okay?
So these wonderful ingredients and techniques were able to survive out in the frontier.
Yes,
Okay.
Yes, I mean, when you check the logs, the description of these expeditions, they're bringing a lot of food. I mean, very different, but mainly from Europe. And mind you, you need to have had money to import these foods from Europe. So these people were very well off. There you go.
Are there any other questions about the history or the? Please. Yes.
You know, there's such a rich oral history of indigenous people
Mhm.
in the border region, being a fronteriza myself. And as you mentioned, Eagle Pass, I was like, oh, my people are from like Piedras and Eagle. So I'm curious, like, what are some of the things that have jumped out about like the cooking tradition, or even like where does a person even start trying to learn the indigenous history and culture? Because I know like we hold a lot of things in our family, but like as you've been doing research, have there been any like threads of where we can start understanding more about the indigenous richness and culinary?
Yeah, repeat the question.
She wants to know if there's any information or how we get to learn about the roots of the indigenous people cooking and their influence in the in this cuisine along the border. Is that you have Spaniards, but then you have the Native Americans. How I have approached it is through oral history, as you mentioned. I start from today, and then I work my way back. I interview people that lived in ejidos, in Coahuila, also in the state of Coahuila, on the other side of the border of Eagle Pass, in El Indio, Texas. You still have ejidos, and you also have family compounds that people have, que son agregaciones. Yes. And so I start with them, and then they tell me, I want to show you how my grandmother used to make it. And now they are descendants of this group of people, because if you're an anthropologist, especially a biological anthropologist, these people can look at your body, and they look at the body as a cultural text and find out if you're Native American or not, the physical side of it. And I won't go too much into the DNA, but I'm pretty sure that if they do that, they'll find out that they're related. Now, when I do that, is the most problematic for me is when I'm interviewing people and I say, well, this has indigenous origins, you know, and they say, oh no, it's not indigenous origins. And they look at indigenous and all this, said, yeah, it is. Because when it comes to barbacoa, I said, you know, this method is cooking here in the pole, but also I said, also another mistake you can do is when you study, you have to not correct people, but have some type of social grace that you can correct, but without insulting. And so when I tell them, well, you know, the goat, this cabrito that you're making, has its origins in the Middle East. Okay? And they say, oh, no.
Yeah.
This goat started in Monterrey. I said, oh. So this is the part is that I tell you that you just have to be very careful, interview, In anthropology, they show you should never interrupt the flow of communication. That is, do not correct people. What you want to do is get another variant of that story. If it's Monterrey, great, wonderful. Okay? Because I also experienced that in Philadelphia. I went to visit the Liberty Bell, and there were a lot of tourists, and they give you the history of the Liberty Bell. And I always remember this man from New Orleans said, this bell didn't crack this way. He said, I'm from New Orleans, and people told me that the subway cracked the bell. But the subway came after the Liberty Bell. But then you listen, but don't interrupt, right? Because it's another story. And then I asked the tour guide, I said, which is a federal officer, part of the parks, the interior department. He said, well, you can come over to my office and see, because we record all the different histories, of the Liberty Bell. So with me too is that I'm very interested in the different ways, like how to make cabrito, right? I mean, people have many different ways to make cabrito. Al pastor, a la griega, barbacoa, and they go on and on. Sangre fritada, they make. So they go on, and all of them have their own recipes. Even within a town, even within a family, you have different ways to prepare the cabrito. And if you go to Marfa, Texas, it's different from Eagle Pass. Or you go to the valley, it's different. So my point is just start doing it as an interview. The oral is very important, the oral history.
We'll do one last, well, maybe two. Go ahead. Yes, Diana, and then Jacqueline.
My question, Doctor, is what you're describing to me is invaders coming into a territory to take over the territory. And under that scenario, they do not want to interact in any intimate way with the indigenous population. Now, I remember that the Europeans used several, the colonizers used several matrices deals to determine that we were uncivilized. One thing was that we did not eat our meals on a regular basis, and that we did not sit down as a group 3 times a day and eat. The elders kept the food going all day long, and when you got hungry, you went in and you ate whatever they were cooking, unless it was a feast or it was a ceremony or something like that. We didn't eat together, sit down 3 times a day and eat together. We did not have special food for breakfast as opposed for lunch and dinner like we do here. And we did not use utensils. We used our hands. And I was told that there was a big issue when we were told we had to use forks and knives to be civilized. Because in the beginning, all the people could taste was the metal when they used the fork, because we're used to using our hands. So my question to you is, these are invaders, wealthy invaders that are coming in to take our land and believe that the indigenous people are uncivilized. How did the food get meshed? How did it get meshed? Because they brought their own cooks. They brought their own people to learn how to cook it. How did it get meshed?
One is, first, I'm going to address the issue of invaders. You have to realize that all these people had Native Americans or had, indigenous people as slaves. And many of them were killed, actually killed. They also were genocide. And many of them just fled to missions for protection. And then others became assimilated, that they went and married Mexicans. Now, how was it meshed? Is just to give an idea, is in Mesoamerica with the Aztecs and the Spaniards, it is understood that the Aztecs also borrowed from them and created new things. For example, the nuns were taught by Native American women how to cook. Okay? When you had the convents, you had the Native Americans, the whole mole thing, they say mole, so they always say it's the nuns, but the women were there, the Native American women were there, working with them. And so just to give you an idea, and I think this is my idea, that we have talked for a day and a half that people are creative. So if you give them, I think, a watermelon or something, I think that the people, the pre-contact people, when they saw that food, they talked among themselves and said, what is this? Oh, we can blend it here, do this. They did what the advice you gave to the young lady that wanted to learn how to cook. As you start cooking, you mix things and do it until you get it perfect. Now, there is a form here of also enforce cultural change, that you take away their foods and you put this on them, and this is what we have and we got to do it. And pardon me?
That's how grape dumplings came about.
Yes, it came from. Also, the other thing you have to realize, many of these groups would prepare food in private, not in the public sector. That is, they didn't want to upset the Spanish. They still prepare their foods. And still today, many anthropologists, and all of you know in real life today, that there is a hidden transcript and an open transcript. I mean, I want to give you an example. My students, when they come to my office to talk, they're very polite and nice and everything. Really, I mean, they exhibit behavior that I want to see. And then behind me, the hidden transcript is when they criticize me, okay? And they like me, but they will never criticize me because I have a lot of privilege. But that's what it means. And I think that many of these Native Americans and indigenous people did accept food, but didn't get into it all the time. I mean, separately they would experiment. That's what I think happened.
Thank you.
Okay, ready?
Thank you,
Okay,
Mario.
thank
Very,
you.
very much. We could go on. I would like to go on, but thank you.